Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Hollis. So you want me to call the meeting to order?
I think we're ready.
All right. So we will call this meeting to order at 4:47 p.m. And Hina, will you do a roll call so we can establish if we have quorum?
Yes. Miss Hollis,
Present.
Mr. Brooks, Miss Elderi, Mr. Griggs.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Hey, Dion. Sorry.
Hi, I can't turn on my camera, but I am here.
Okay. Mr. Brooks is not, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Griggs,
Here.
Dr. Bryant,
Present.
Sudie,
Here.
Mr. Langban, Jason. I thought I saw you.
He is here. His microphone seems to be not working, but he's
Okay,
here.
perfect.
Mhm.
Mr. Baker and Miss Rayner.
Here.
Perfect.
All right. So we do have quorum. We do need to vote on the agenda for today. If everyone is okay with that agenda, with the one potential thing, Ms. Hollis, being if we do, and I don't know if we do, if we have Go Team folks who are running for Go Team who would like to do public comment, we could decide to put all of our public comment at the front. Okay. And I see a note from Dion that says, I'm not sure if I'll be available the entire meeting. Oh, right. So she has asked me to run the meeting. She is traveling. So
I
mhm.
did not receive email addresses. I'm not sure
Okay.
if they sent that email during the day because Ms. Elderi did request that information yesterday evening, but I'm not sure.
I did not receive anything,
Okay.
but I did share, in case they aren't allowed to share it with me, I did ask them to share our meeting information and Zoom link and reach out to the individuals who have put their names in the hat. I'm not sure if they did. I did not receive a response from anyone that I sent the email to, which was Travis, Ms. Champion, Diane Jacoby, and the Go Team office.
And Diana's trying to get in now. What I will say is we do have the blurbs that they created this year for each individual person. So what we can do is send that out via Remind to an IC Messenger to families with the information of how to get to their individual link. And so we can do that tomorrow to circumvent the fact that we were not able to get, I don't see any of the candidates actually on right
Okay.
now.
Do we have anybody signed up for public comment at all?
They wouldn't have signed up for public comment.
Okay. All right. Well, then I don't think we need to approve the agenda. I mean, amend the agenda for that. So we do need to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
I had a quick question, Miss Nolan.
Sure.
You had included an attachment in what you sent out about the chairs and coordination of different
Yes.
structures.
Yes.
Where does that map onto the agenda?
It's funny. We had a similar question, and I think that I had thought it was on the pulse check, though that is not the way that the slides look. So we can amend to add that in the announcements section if we need to.
I think we did it as an announcement before last time, so I think it would need to be amended to the discussion. Or it was done during the information items. It was done at a non-discussed point in the meeting last week.
Right. because it was a letter in from them. So shall we amend it to place it in discussion or information?
Yeah, I move that we add a fourth point to the discussion items related to structural coordination,
Okay,
and then, have that be the agenda that we're voting on.
perfect. Can we take so that is your movement. Do we have a second on Josh's motion to amend the discussion items to add D, structural coordination?
I'll second it.
All right. And then we need to take a motion to approve. Does that count as approving the amended agenda? I think we have to then take that amended agenda and approve it for tonight.
We have to vote.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
okay, that's everyone.
Any opposed? All right.
All right, so I will,
Now,
I'm sorry.
is my microphone working now? I just
Yes.
wanted to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we will add that, I presume, after pulse check or a part of the pulse check.
We'll add it as D to the discussion items.
Okay.
So, yeah. All right. We also need to approve the minutes from the previous meeting, unless there are any changes needed to those minutes.
I'll approve.
We need a second.
I just second.
All right, all in favor? 1, 2.
Aye.
That looks like everybody. Anyone opposed? All right. Good. Then we are to the public comment section.
There's
Ms.
been
Hollis,
no public comment requests since September.
all right. We do have the note from Stacy Barton White that was emailed to us, which I think
I
maybe,
assumed that was letter C in our discussion items, but I might have that wrong.
yes, okay. You can do that there.
I think it would be important to read that into public comment, or we can just add it in the meeting minutes, but her initial request, whichever one you guys want to do, we can attach it to the meeting minutes if you'd like.
Okay. We can attach it to the meeting minutes. Perfect. Then we will move then, if there's no public comment, into the discussion items. Starting Ms. Hollis with the spring map results.
Okay, so I have Ms. Williams and Ms. Moore on to spring map results is really a part of the principal report, but I can advance to that. But I have them on here to go over those data points. So I'm going to yield the floor to Ms. Moore and Ms. Williams.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm trying to let someone move from beside me. Hi, so we'll go ahead and look at the ELA map data. This is our overall map data with all students. and we pulled out our subgroup, students with disabilities, Black and Hispanic. We can see that from fall to spring, we are trending in the right direction, decreasing the beginning level and increasing our proficient to distinguish. There are some spaces where we did not see a dramatic increase like we would have wanted. However, there are also spaces where all students were not tested. So we were losing some students in that aspect. For our SWD data, the same, we are seeing decreases. However, one thing that we did lift is that in our 7th and 8th grade spaces, there's some opportunity for growth there with targeted supports and doing more pullouts when it comes to the beginning level decreasing.
Quick clarification question. The cutoffs for what's advanced, what's proficient, etc., are those the same across the whole year, or does the cutoff from the fall raise by the time you get to the spring? Like, are you expected in order to be advanced proficient at the spring, the cutoff is now higher than what it was in the fall?
Correct.
It does
It's a
go.
moving target.
Yeah, it does grow with the knowledge that is given. Like the more the students learn throughout the year, the RIT score advances with the progression through the year.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm like a slide behind in processing, but on the overall headlines, then I think that's encouraging, right? Because it's not only it's not like you're seeing progress against a fixed standard. You're seeing progress over the year as the standard is increasing.
That is correct.
Awesome.
And for attendance purposes, I think Mr. Brooks has joined.
We see a lot of similar trends in our math data as well. So this is the same setup as you just saw with ELA, just with math. As you see at the top with all of our students, we have the same trend where we're taking our beginner learners and decreasing them. We are for the spring. We also increased our distinguished and our proficient, those in the green on the right. We saw similar trends from fall to spring across our subgroups as well. Again, echoing that in the spring administration, we had less time to do makeups. It was an optional window for us. So we noticed that we didn't have as many data points as we would have had in the fall and winter. So the data is what it is because that's who we have. But it is something to note that we didn't get every single student as we did in the fall and the winter. And for our SWD data, at the top is all students compared to SWD at the bottom. As Ms. Williams said, we do have opportunities for growth in our beginners, but we did see some increases in our distinguished SWD students as well. We are focusing on targeted support through stations this week, specifically to prepare for end of year testing, but all year we've been pulling small groups in co-taught classes every day. We just need to make sure that we're focused on the right standards at that time. So just making sure that our kids are here so they can get that targeted instruction.
Quick clarification question, Ms. Moore. You mentioned the slightly lower observation points because of the short window. Do you have a sense of those who aren't included in the third wave and the spring wave, like what their distribution was like earlier in the year? Like, was it pretty proportional to distribution of overall, or was it overrepresented from historic? Like, I'm trying to understand if like some of our beginning proficient scorers are the ones who were overrepresented and not taking in the spring, and that might be boosting our scores up, or if it was pretty equivalent.
I think it's a mix of things. That was also the week of the Orlando trip for our 8th graders. Okay. And we tried to get them on that Monday, but some weren't here. And then I know that we missed some of our SWD kids who hit us in a couple of subgroup buckets. So while I can't say it's any one population that wasn't tested, it was kind of a mix.
Got it.
Ms. Aldieri?
So this slide that you have, the next slide, I think it is slide 13. And I may have missed this when Josh was just speaking. If you could go to the next slide. Do you have that same one for the other subgroups that you've broken out? The grade level and I don't see it here, but do you see any trends within those for the Hispanic students or the Black students, grade wise?
I don't think it's in this presentation, but we do notice historically that our other subgroups, Hispanic, our EL students, are making a little bit more progress than our Black students and our students with disabilities. But we also see that that correlates with their attendance as well. ELL and Hispanic students have better attendance overall, and their test scores show that. So that is a trend that we've been seeing over this year.
And then do you have the grade? Are you seeing anything across the grade specific, like how you broke it out for SWD on that slide 13, where it has grade level differences for the subgroup compared to overall?
It's pretty similar across grade levels.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
No problem.
Because I thought we were going to do the lift from the parent first, our slides are not in order, but if you look at this slide, you can see the grade breakdown and look at the bottom one for 2025, 26 for ELA and math. But this is just spring.
The value in this slide looks like it's showing you the cohort. So like our 8th graders, we can track them back to 6th grade, where in 6th grade, there was very high percentages of beginning proficient, 43 and 48. And now by 8th grade at the spring administration, it is 33.
And you know what? This is for Black students only, because that was what the conversation was about with the call out from the parent. So this is not everybody's data. This is that specific subgroup that was called out in that letter. So if we go back, and I'm sorry for going out of order with the agenda, but we were supposed to talk about the letter, and that's what this data is referencing. This is what we showed you in October when this first was lifted. And then I'll let Ms. Moore and Ms. Williams continue from there with the rest.
Thank you, Principal Hollis. And I did share that slide from what you highlighted in the fall with Ms. Burton White. I did reference the slide and the recording of our previous GOT meeting. And we can talk more if you think we need to talk about it more later.
And we can keep it going because it's still map data, right, that we're using right now. We don't have milestones data at this time. So it's still along with the discussion, but I'll let Ms. Moore and Ms. Williams talk about what interventions we've done and the rest.
And for those listening, I'll just do a short little blurb here. Ms. Burton White reached out to the CAT regarding looking at subgroup data, specifically academic gaps between Black students and other subgroups, and asked for what intervention strategies are being used at each schools. And the CAT doesn't have access, it's different data at each school. So I reached out to Principal Hollis and our GO team specifically to respond per Howard, and then gave the information that Principal Hollis has given us in the fall.
So on this slide, next slide, sorry. Some targeted supports that we have, this is pretty inclusive, but not all-inclusive. There may be some things that, we left out, but we have Saturday School, which targets those students that are in the bottom 25%, are encouraged to come and attend so they can get additional math and ELA support. We also have in-school support, reading and math support classes that happen during their connections period. We use their map and milestones data to determine who's going to be a part of that class. And the teacher is the foundational skills so that the students can be more successful in their core class. We also offer tutoring and pull-out support. Myself, Miss Williams, Mr. Griffith, we have a parent volunteer as well, are pulling out students throughout the year, but really targeted towards after our spring, after we get that map data of pulling out kids or pushing into classes to support so that those kids who just need a little bit more so they can get ready for EOY testing, get that extra targeted support and individualization. And then we also have MTSS and ESOL support. We have 2 teachers that push into classes to support. And then we also have our MTSS lead who's doing progress monitoring throughout the day and making sure that those kids get the supports that they need.
Something different this year, we added the special ed lead teachers are actually helping with supports, pullouts for special ed students as well.
And our district specialists have started coming in to support with pullouts as well.
All hands on deck.
Is our opt-out of some of these interventions decreasing, or as I know we've talked about that there is some degree of opt-out of some interventions. Is there anything changing with that?
I don't necessarily believe that we're tracking that per se. I don't think it was more than 5 students that opted out from it this year. And I don't think more than 5 students opted out last year. So most parents are okay with us adding, but I think that the first year, which was my first year when we started intervention in this way through Connections, it was a community shift, for us to use MAP to place students into intervention, where some students may not have taken MAP seriously and didn't realize that that was going to get them into the intervention class. We've seen that trend decline. So not many students that's opting out.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, speaking to math, that we may get questions at the beginning of the year as to why the student has been placed in that class. And they may question that placement, but they're highly encouraged to stay after we have that data talk. The parent and the teacher are in agreement that that's the best way forward for that student.
And if we see a huge shift from fall to winter, say beginning to proficient, and then the data is trending in the class that way as well, there are a couple of kids that we will pull out and allow them to go into the regular Connections classes. But I'm not going to act as though that is half the classes. Given that opportunity is really like 2 to 3 per grade level.
Mr. Griggs?
You mentioned earlier some data around attendance. I think you had some slides. I don't know if you want to talk us through.
There's the data on attendance. Thank you for that segue. So when you read this slide, blue is what we want. We want students to be at school most of the time, if not all the time, versus red is the other side. They're missing a lot of days. And you'll see that at the top, our Black subgroup has a higher amount of students who do not meet that attendance minimum versus our other 2 subgroups on this slide, Hispanic and then mixed, have lower amounts of students who do not meet that attendance threshold. And you see that correlate with their test data as well. Ms. Aldieri?
When you look at just the bottom quartile or whatever cutoff you use to do the intervention, do you see across all students that are in that marker that their attendance is different from the overall group? Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
And if you haven't looked at it, that's okay. I'm just wondering, is it a trend we're seeing across all students that are having challenges, or is it just across a subgroup?
I can only speak to
I guess a racial subgroup versus academic achievement subgroup.
I can only speak to 8th grade, and I would say that yes, attendance is an issue for the children who are in there.
I would love to see like the bottom. I know I'm rolling off, but as a community member, I would love to see the bottom quartile data as a subgroup also that's kind of delineated out when we're talking about some of the challenges to overcome, and see what their attendance, if it's a challenge with that subgroup as well.
I think that specific of data would have to be pulled by the data strategist. That's not something that we have readily accessible.
Is that something that you could ask for, or would you like me to ask for?
I don't mind asking for it. I just would need to know the cadence for which I'm asking, because that's not something that is readily accessible. Someone has to pull that.
Right.
Like we pulled the mobility rate at the beginning of the year,
right,
and track their achievement data, like the cadence in which you want the bottom quartile's attendance data tracked.
I think if we can get it at some point the end of this school year, just to get maybe a baseline to see how that compares. And I know that you've been working hard to push resources to help with chronic absenteeism. I think if that is something that we see across the students who are all in that bottom, or a larger portion in that bottom quartile, then that's another conversation, right, to have and remind not just our Black subgroup, but across a larger population. Does that make sense? I know we talk about attendance with all, but
yes, that makes sense.
I don't think we've ever seen that. And in fact, I don't think I've ever seen that in any data presentation anywhere. So I think it'd be really good data to see.
Can you?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think that you haven't seen it in any data presentation because you're crossing information. And so it's going to take more,
It's probably two different information systems. So
yeah.
We see it in racial subgroups, but we don't see it in the subgroup academic
because
achievement.
that's easier. What you're saying is I'm pulling out
right
the people based on map data in order to extrapolate all these other things, and that's not it's not a characteristic that's tracked. Like no one's tagged as a bottom quartile student in order to easily track that data. So you're having to pull the data differently. Not that it can't be done by people who that's what their job is to do. It's just not readily accessible by us at the school level where we're looking at everything. And we don't have time to just pull data because that's going to take more effort is what I'm saying. So if we're saying that's something we want for beginning of the year, go team, that's fine. Is that just a beginning of the year data point, looking at end of year from the prior year, or is this something that we want trended is what I'm asking.
I don't feel super strongly. I think our two best options are once a year after the third administration or once with each of the MAP administrations, right? So you could do it like once in the spring, once in the winter, once in the fall, if you wanted to use that poll for with each MAP administration to kind of drive community awareness and parent awareness around the correlation. It could be a helpful data point to pull, but I don't feel super strongly. I think once is sufficient, but if you would want to use it as part of a communication campaign to drive attendance, I would say with each MAP administration is when I would suggest pulling it.
And once doing the Midtown cluster data dig, once the data team builds out, to Principal Hollis's point, the formula to pull that data, then it's them just refreshing that graph with the next data. The model is already written. So we had him refresh this year previous slides that we used in graphs last year, that it was just now pull it for this year. So it was just quicker updates than once something's built out.
I would say, just so that we're pulling the data the way you're intending for it to be seen, because the way that I am interpreting the ask might be different than what you're asking for. Maybe you should ask so I can see how you want to explicitly delineate it, and then we will continue to ask for that update.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Moore, if you want to continue with the attendance for the other subgroups we've been tracking.
So this is our attendance data. At the top is students who are not tagged as SWD, and at the bottom is the ones that are. You see that the students who, SWD students, have higher attendance concerns than students who aren't. When we look at the very bottom, that is EL versus former versus not. So when you're here for a certain amount of time, you exit the program, or you score high enough in your access test, you exit the program, and you're still tagged for 2 years, so that we can track that data. So we have their attendance trends there as well.
One thing I want to point out is that we've made increases in the trend data for all of the other subgroups except for the one where it's staying pretty stagnant. And that would also speak to our number one thing, which is if the students are not in the seats, then it becomes more difficult to push the information to get the data to decrease. And then this is what we were talking about earlier with Mr. Griggs about cohort tracking to prove that we have decreased the beginning level, but we've also increased the proficient and above for each cohort year on year, which means that the achievement gap is declining year on year. And this was trending Black students explicitly because that is what the request was. Also note that we didn't mean to cut off the ELA data. We will pull that up when I send it out and post it online. But it's difficult to also trend the reading data since we have new standards this year. So that's not an apples to apples comparison to trend the last 2 years for ELA with this year's ELA. Although with this baseline data, the students should be pretty much aligned to what we have seen in recent years with ELA, but it's just still not an apples to apples comparison. And the data from the state will be delayed because this is a new test.
I think it's also important to mention that the 75 sixth graders that you see move to seventh, it's not always that same 4. We have a lot of kids move in and move out, which affects the data as well.
Yeah, I was noticing that 75 to 81 to 91. But I was going to say, like, it is just the math progression. If you look at the asset-based view of proficient and distinguished, going from 17 to
31
to 36% in 2 years. That I think is strong progression.
And if we wanted to, again, we could show transiency percentage. Again, I think Principal Hollis, I don't know how much access you have to transiency for subgroup, but that is something that you could add in a report like this to show what percentage of the population took the test, of whatever population you're talking about, as well as the transiency rate or mobility rate.
Earlier, someone mentioned in passing that we know, I think it was Miss Algieri, that she knows there's a lot you all have done to drive attendance can we just maybe create a little bit of space for you to verbally share some of what you've done to drive attendance improvement?
Ms.
Go
Moore,
ahead.
you look like you were about to start talking.
I was going to ask you if we'll take that one.
Um, we do perfect attendance, monthly celebrations. We have a 10 to win celebration. So after the first 30 days of schools, the counselors and the social worker actually goes individually to those students to have conversations with them. And if they come 10 days in a row, then they get a gift card. It's not an expensive gift card by any means, but a small little token to say actually snacks. And then if they do it for a month, then they get a gift card. We also do the dot matrix with our grade level cohorts where we make sure that every student is connected in relationship to an adult in the building, so that if you have a relationship with that child, then more than likely you telling them directly, hey, we noticed that you've been absent and we need you to come on to school, it has a larger impact. We also track using Everyday Lab Pro, which is the software that the district purchased through school social working, to see who is trending and if the trends for negative attendance mean something. So that's where the whole child intervention program comes in, where we do check and connects. We send alerts to families. We also, our old school teachers call home when they see that kids have been absent for multiple days. And then my student support team and I, we meet weekly to look at the data and identify students that we need to contact. And very interestingly enough, sometimes when we contact them, we find out other things that are happening as to why the attendance is occurring, and we give them the supports that they need. It doesn't necessarily always translate into them showing up, but it does translate into the school supporting the whole child and not just are we driving this achievement data machine, but how are we showing up for the child and their needs? An example would be, one family, mom was expecting child number extra, right? And that posed a financial difficulty on that family. And so we were able to put them in touch with the resources that the district had, go to the hub to get them some groceries and do other things to make sure that the family needs are met, because we know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, bottom needs aren't met, then they're not really worried about showing up for milestones, right? So those are just some of the things we do. We do grade level competition, who can give me the best data in the next 10 days. We have a traveling Rams trophy. So whoever with the attendance, homeroom attendance cohort with the highest percentage for that month, they get the Rams trophy and some donuts for that morning. And that trophy moves every month. And the kids and the teachers specifically are very competitive as it relates to that. One of our 8th grade teachers hid the trophy because he did not want it to go to the next student group, but we found it. So we do a lot of fun things, and it's not, I don't want it to sound like we're bribing them to get to come to school, because we don't. They don't even know what treat they're getting. They just happen to get the treat, right? And so it's more so about, if you can come, meaning if you're sick, we understand. That's why we do it monthly, and we have multiple ways for students to engage in that space. It's just to incentivize, and we're doing the same thing during testing. If your cohort, if the kids that's in your testing room are there that day, then they get a little treat. And if everybody comes all 10 days, then that class, or 5 days, 10 days, well, I think it's like 8 days for 8th grade, and then 5 days for 7th and 5 days for 6th, they get a ticket to the ice cream truck. So it's like helping each other know that we all show up for each other. And it's not just the administration or teachers. If you look at what we just broken down, everybody has a part in it. Did I answer your question, Mr. Green?
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Moving on. Thank you, Ms. Moore and Ms. Williams, for helping us with that data dive. We are supposed to have an activity now to discuss, based on the data, what are 2 to 3 potential needs that we have for 26-27 school year. And we're looking at the following questions. What is the data telling us? What good news is there to celebrate? Where are growth opportunities, and what trends do we see in the data? So if I need to go back a page or two for answers to these questions, so that essentially we're looking at these questions, that's the pulse check, so that we can look at what do we need to do for next year as we prepare over the summer.
But I feel like I was kind of celebrating along the way things that I saw. So I would just re-underline those things. I know that David T. Howard was a beating the odds school and for the 2024 scores, which means that it was at least one standard deviation higher than peer schools with similar characteristics. I'm not sure if it seems like the 2025 scores haven't been scored or done the data analysis from the Office of the Governor yet, but seeing what we saw on the cohort level, I think support some of those that high level designation of beating the odds. So I think that's encouraging. I am kind of taking at face value out of what you all who are living and breathing the data all the time are telling us, which is that one of your most important predictors of success, like certainly it looks like it correlates, but what you're seeing on the ground, you think it may be a causal factor, is the piece around attendance. And so that seems like something that would be on my mind. How that translates into specific strategies, I don't know, because you just spent 6 minutes walking us through strategies you already engage in. So I don't know that I have an obvious here's what's missing answer on that front. But it does seem like it's going to be an important continued focus as we go into next year, and maybe asking what more we can do there. Maybe there's a way to lift student voice about what would they want to see that could, help them next year. I don't know if there's ways to do that. That's not a big burden.
Well,
But that's
we do
yeah.
that. We do have
Okay.
equity conversations. The past years we've used the assistant principals to target those kinds of questions with the African American subgroup. And Miss Randolph and I kind of target the generic grouping of students, meaning, it's more inclusive in who's invited. So we do that. We do look at the data qualitatively from students to kind of make some decisions as well.
But that would be the only thing that would be on my mind is like looking at this as attendance. Well, actually, there's one other thing that's a wondering, which is looking at the cohorts each year that have come into the school, like the 6th grade cohort that came in this year versus the year before. This is the year before. Their starting positions are looking different. And so I don't know if you're expecting that trend to continue with next year's 6th grade cohort, if you have any access to 5th grade data. But that would be another thing that would be on my mind is as the data, if that trend continues, are the strategies that move students from beginning proficient to developing the same as the ones that move developing students to proficient? because you may find yourself in a position where you have a much bigger developing proficiency group that you're trying to move, and a much like your beginning proficiency group's getting smaller that's entering into you. So that's another. I don't have any opinions or advocacies, but it's just a maybe wondering to think about like what's the entering cohort like, and are the strategies for beginning proficient students that are effective the same as the ones for developing proficiency students, moving them into proficiency?
Traditionally, they're not, because you have motivation playing a role into that. If it's intrinsically or extrinsically, and do we have to provide more extrinsic motivation from the school in order to move you from one cohort to the one proficiency band to the next? But because of that, we do use more of a tiered approach in order to get the gains that we've gotten, where in order to move somebody from developing to proficient, depending on what their needs are, it might just look like small group pull out in the classroom itself, where to get someone from beginning to developing, that takes a more strategic and more time sensitive approach. And so that's when we're doing lunch and learns and pulling them from connections classes. So we already have a tiered approach to that, because we do have both ends of the string that we're targeting. Unfortunately, with the staff members that we have. So that's why we do a lot of work around tier 1 instruction, because when you're talking about cusp developing or cusp proficient students and trying to move them to the next band, a lot of that work can be done in the classroom during that 70 minutes. When you're trying to make up grade level reading proficiency, that can't be done in a 70-minute class, right? And so that's when those other things are coming into play. Ms. Williams, are you still on if you want to talk more about what we're doing? Because at the root of everything, Dr. Johnson has already told us literacy is what influences all this data, right? And if they come in beginning level in reading, it does make it harder to move up the proficiencies band in reading and math unless we do something specifically to target them. Ms. Williams, you can speak to some of the things we've done this year around targeting literacy.
So specifically, some of the things that we've done surrounding targeting literacy, I'm sorry, I'm still at the school. We have, I'm gonna move. So some things that we've done to target literacy, starting with the reading connections classes, I make it a point to plan with that teacher every day. And we start with those basic skills that students may need more support with, that they don't really get to target much of in ELA, because we are moving on to those higher skills, such as just reading comprehension, understanding how to annotate a text, understanding what to look for when you're reading literary text, informational text. And we've also been pushing into the social studies PLCs to work on their literacy skills, even so much as how to read specific text to pull out what you need for a constructed response. We have been pushing paired text across the board. So if we have a text and we notice that it's a lower Lexile level that's been included in our curriculum, we work to find another text that's at a higher Lexile level that'll stretch the students. And I know that in 7th grade math, Ms. Blue, we were talking and working together, and she worked with Ms. Nolan on strategies that we could use to help break down vocabulary and to understand how it would be best to break down the vocabulary in a way that the students have been practicing and that they're familiar with, so they can use those skills and consistently build on them across all contents and across all grade levels. So that's just a small snippet of what we've been doing to target literacy, but it's a lot.
I will add to that, not add, but call it out specifically when she's saying the social studies team is working with us. The social studies, I want to say in 6th and 7th grade, have novel studies. And this year in 8th grade, we're actually adding a novel to their content that talks about civil rights and what's happening in Old Fourth Ward. And we're going to do a walking field trip after Milestones around the things that they read about and actually pointing out those actual destinations right in their area. And so the goal is, since this is our first year doing it, is to incorporate it in the timeline of pacing next year. So this was a text from a professor that was at UGA. So this is something that we've added on. So we're always looking of ways to grow and complement what is happening in social studies with what's happening in ELA. And even with our, we also have author visits multiple times a year and add those novels in to stretch our students' reading. And we've also added on this year with STEAM journaling. And so they've been writing more. And we know that when we get to the secondary space, we see greater mastery of comprehension when students are able to write on other topics. So
I also want to add in the support that we get through Miss Neal. She does work with social studies and ELA to teach specific units to the students. So she might have a poetry unit, she might have an MLA unit. And so that's also something that occurs consistently throughout the year.
So getting back to the questions, so we can get through the meeting today. What is the data telling us? What good news do we have to celebrate? So Mr. Greets pointed out some things I'm not sure if others want to add. What are growth opportunities? We all said the attendance.
Just to add on the attendance piece too, I think that there may be a growth opportunity there for communicating it to the community, to parents. I know we communicate it to the kids, but I don't know. We have some parent members on the call, but I think one of the things that some parents don't understand is that, even though we say that over and over to them, so that may be an opportunity for us too.
We do make individual calls to the parent groups that are in the red. So Ms. Dola, as a parent and teacher, we don't call you because your child is in the green or the blue in that instance. But our student support team does, in addition to what the teachers do, call the parents and specify the why, and there's a letter that goes out through that Everyday Lab Pro. So we are adding on that parent liaison next year. So that is work that definitely she would be assisting with, but we do call individually outside of what the teachers do with attendance, because it's a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that, if the kids aren't in their seats, we can't teach them. And at this age, they can't drive themselves. So if they're not on the bus and they're a car rider, like, we have to partner with parents to make sure that they're where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be.
And I think that goes to that message where I was looking at, like, we often look at attendance and subgroups by race or students with disabilities. So showing it the link to academic achievement, if there are trends across all of our students, quartile and subgrouped out by quartiles, can show that, to your point, Ms. Moore, and we've heard it and said it many times, they said cheeks need to be in seats. I think that's what one of the senior leadership individuals said back in the fall. And that is huge. And not just talking, I think sometimes the data can be hidden if you show it in certain ways. So putting that message out is really important, whether you be traveling for pleasure and your kid has a great grade, that those makeup tests make impact on the teachers having to stay late or come in early or grade tests outside of it, or you are in the bottom quartile and middle quartile and are seeing some challenges with attendance there for, reasons that are outside of your ability. Attendance is super important for academic achievement.
And what is very funny that you say that, Ms. Eldery, we do the calls to both ends. I promise you.
I know.
We hear people to say, "Oh, well, we took them on an experience, and they spent 10 days in whatever country," and we're like, "That's awesome!" Except for you have this the school attendance. I mean, the school calendar to know when to better plan, because we really need them in the building, so they get the same calls as the lower quartile.
And that's
but
great
that's
to
a good
hear.
point, because we always emphasize one over the other.
Yeah, and I
verbally.
think in the community, I hear that it's emphasized with our Black subgroup, and I think that that is not the actualities of our schools. I think we see, and I don't know the data, but I think chronic absenteeism might be across various subgroups and different reasons. So just want to represent
We
the
have been
data.
talking about it very extensively in the student support team meetings, which, again, does not involve teachers, because I have them in enough meetings. But actually, our percentage that's in the red, which is the lower or counting against us for attendance for CCRPI for white students, has increased this year. So we're seeing a slight decline in attendance for our white subgroup. So we're not looking at, when we look at the data, we're looking at every subgroup that we can look at, but when we're reporting out for time's sake, we do target certain audiences more.
I understand. I think that sometimes people take that negatively, and I've heard that from the community. So I think it is important, and I appreciate your thoroughness with the data, and I know you always are looking at all of the data.
So is there any other points? Because I think Ms. Williams and Ms. Moore are helping us by updating our next slide, which talks to the strengths and weaknesses. Is there anything else that we need to point out before we continue on through the meeting?
I'm sorry.
ELL was our lowest subgroup on some data points in the fall as well. I don't see them on, mentioned on opportunities or strengths anywhere. ELL is different than Hispanic.
It is. I was just looking back to see if it was something else. It is harder for us to pull that data out. If you remember me saying that the first 2 years of them being in the country as new English speakers, they don't count towards this data, but we can look at their access data. And I think that it's not that I think they finished the access testing in February, and so we don't have that data yet. So calling them out in this space, we just didn't do, but we can.
And I think we talked about that at our last meeting, because we've never seen that data. So an opportunity might be to figure out a way to look at data points for them in this space, because if I'm remembering correctly, they do hit some of our reports as one of our subgroups that have a lower performance. So an opportunity would see how could we provide some transparency around that access data, or whatever standardized test that the district is using.
Yes, it just gets tricky because access doesn't really align with these universal screeners, but we will definitely bring somebody on from that department to assist and share that data out. So I guess if you all can add that to our list for opportunities. And then we need to move on to, based on the responses for the strengths and opportunities, what must be true for David T. Howard to achieve excellence? It looks like you're trying to talk, Ms. Nolan. No? Okay. This is a Go Team conversation versus a school that's telling you all. What do you all think needs to be present?
I would say something like administration needs to allocate resources based on academic data appropriately. If we're planning based on responses for strengths, what must be true, that needs to be true. I know if somebody else wants to, the wording's not great, but.
I know I've talked a lot, and I'm being pretty quiet right now because I don't know how to answer this that differently from the work we've already done throughout the course of the year, for next year's strategic plan. So, like, the things that would be on my mind is it would be helpful to us to have continuity of our school leadership, right? Like, if we were to lose members of our school leadership team, that seems like that would be disruptive, to the progression and the plan. So that is on my mind.
And I would say teachers as well, because we've heard that from the community. So teachers and staff, so continuity of instructors in the classroom. Principal Hollis, you are interviewing any open positions, making sure that happens.
And I would maybe adjust the first one. So it's administration needs to allocate resources, not just financial. Make it more general, because part of what we'll likely need to do is, once you all do the first administration of MAP, you're going to be allocating some of your people resources accordingly. Just like you have this year for different types of pullout and intervention classes.
Maybe something along the lines of provide teachers with resources so that they are able to, resources and time to support staff and students. So more or less setting up students and staff and teachers for success so that they can do something.
Or based on the conversation we had, I mean, obviously attendance is really on my mind, but I don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't make it seem like we haven't been doing things. To your point earlier, right? Like, maybe it's continued focus. Like,
Yeah.
maybe that's number 3, continued focus on attendance.
Yeah, with a whole parent mentality too. It isn't just with this, and I know we do it when there's issues, Ms. Hollis. I just feel like that's the more that is, and we do it now all the time, but the more that we say it to parents, the more that they understand, that yes, the school calendar says we have school that day. That doesn't mean you leave for your trip 2 days before school finishes. It means you leave after school finishes.
Oh, Miss Nolan, you're so sweet. Because if you really knew what I walked into when I first got here, and we had a awards program day, and 2/3 of the school would check out early that day. So the attendance on certain days
was
dramatically increased.
Oh, I know it has. I just feel like that continuing that message is and to students and to their families, very proactively, is something we need. We need cheeks and seats, right? So we need buy-in from the get-go on that.
And that's also going, if you do message about that, because in high school, there are tests as Principal Hollis, you know, Sudi knows, others who have high schoolers, there are tests all the way up to last period on the day before break
Graduation.
and on
Yeah.
first period the day after a break. So this is just teaching, more or less training parents, training everyone like school is important and valuable and important.
So I just want to point out or lift this question when we're putting this on here. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're not saying that these things aren't being done. It is saying that we want to continue with these foci.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just
And then
wanted
I
to
would
say
say
that because, you know, everybody doesn't
provide
come to every
teachers,
meeting.
provide teachers with resources and time to plan appropriately. I don't know if we want to include instruct and plan, not just plan,
Plan
but
for instruction.
not
I
just
think
plan for
she also
instruction. I
means
mean the
teach.
actual
Responsive
instruction.
teaching, responsive instruction.
All right.
I would
Sorry,
also
next.
encourage, I'm sorry, I'm just going to add one more thing. I would also encourage the next GO team to do a proactive finance meeting again, if Principal Hollis, you're open to that. I know they're re-looking at how they're calculating projections, but the chair and vice chair, you meeting proactively in the fall, it was, I think, a good meeting. I think that would be really good for something to happen next year again. But that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, so our next step is me and my administrative team will spend the summer preparing for next school year. Schools will begin meeting after July 1st to organize their GO teams. And during our first business meeting in the fall, we will review our strategic priorities and metrics for the year. I think we're at the information. So before information is the discussion, Ms. Noah, on
Yes. Are we, I think we have, but do we feel like we have covered C, the community request for the report out? I would say we have, but I am verifying.
I mean, the one question that's on my mind is I think in the letter there was an explicit request for there to be a task force focused on this. And I'm curious, like Principal Hollis and Miss Moore and Miss Williams, if you would find that helpful or not, and why.
I think just for the record, her question said, it looked at the data and it said, what does the data look like at the middle and high school levels when it comes to proficiency rates of Black and Hispanic students versus others? If the data is still trending in the wrong direction or remains abysmally disproportionate, what exactly is the cluster doing to address this? I would consider this a fire at this point. I'd love to see a task force focused on this as we've done in other areas.
based on the question or the ask, I would probably say I do not think it would be beneficial to have that task force to live at the school level. Maybe the suggestion would be for it to live at the CAT level if we're talking about across multiple grade bands, because I have nothing to do with what is happening to address the achievement gap at Midtown. And so if the question is 6 through 12, what we're doing, I don't believe that that task force should live at Howard specifically.
In task force, how they've used that term task force, like when I sat on last year for testing and assessment, those have lived and the Facilities Master Plan Task Force. Those have lived at the district level. I believe the Equity Committee have recently talked about task force for looking at academic gaps and subgroup data and the potential. So I don't know if you've heard anything about a current task force. You have designated people constantly looking at data and gaps between various different subgroups, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we at the Go team level could establish a committee. However, from my understanding, we cannot establish a committee that lives outside of our term, and this is our last meeting. So then you have the CAT could establish a committee, which we have our last meeting tomorrow, and they would have to discuss, and we could reach out to the district. Principal Hollis, I don't know if you want to ask Mr. Usher or who the appropriate person would be if there is currently a task force across the district, what they're looking at school by school. I assume they are looking at these data points. Is that correct?
They are, but I'm not sure. Go ahead.
So the question would be, what exactly would be the asks of the task force? Like what would be whoever designs it, meaning the Go team that designs the committee for the task force and or the CAT would need to come up with goals for that to do. And Josh, at this point,
no, just to be clear, I wasn't advocating for the establishment of a task force. I was going back to the message and recognizing this is what the parent or community member was asking for. And so it says in that meeting, I asked how our Go team to create a task force and a specific plan to stop the widening achievement gap to put the impacted students back on an upward trajectory. To date, I haven't heard back on my request. And I know you responded with a lot more information, but it's just making me think, and this recording will have a lot more information responding to that.
Right. And we did respond. In my meeting with Principal Hollis, and you can speak to it, Principal Hollis, our chair principal meeting, at the next Go team meeting, which I linked to.
Was November.
Right. Principal Hollis did with her team of members that are dedicated at looking at this data, provide us data to respond. So I don't believe Ms. Burton White was on that phone call, but I did send her that link and show that we did respond. Principal Hollis and her, what I would call her internal task force, that data dives and looks at this data in instruction, did respond to it and actually did show us some of the same intervention information and kind of piece it out.
Got it. So basically our response is, or would be, if you want a cluster task force, that can't happen here, and there could be value in that. If you're wanting to see progress in within this school one, we have more of a story of progress that we want to make sure is clearly understood. And we have internal governance and mechanisms in the school that's driving the progress. And if you're curious to learn more about that as we head into next school year, that's something that we could connect on. But at this point, it doesn't seem like a school level task force makes sense, nor given the time horizons of the Go teams, would it make sense to create one with 30 days left.
And to your point, the question was literally, the original question was lifted in September. And so that October and November Go team meetings, we spoke on the data for literacy, if I'm not mistaken, in October, and for numeracy in November. So we have gone over this data, and we go over it all the time. As Nolan can tell you, we go over it in PLCs, we go over it in vertical, we go over it as a faculty. We go over the data. One of the candidates for trying to get the few teaching spots we do have was like, oh, I want to know how often we discuss data. I say that every meeting. So we go over the data very frequently. And if there's something, I don't know, because we're not trying to hide the data. We
Yeah,
break
yeah.
it down by subgroup. We break it down in all kinds of ways. So we really do discuss the data. It might not look the way, or it might not say what we want it to say, but we don't try to change what it says.
And I would say from a CAT level, the data is different at each school, and there's different interventions at each school, and how they look at the data and what they're doing. And I've seen when I've watched other schools, they are intensively reviewing their data, subgroup data, and talking about interventions. And I would really encourage people to watch Go Team meetings, because some of these are requirements by the district and some are additional things. And to Principal Hollis's point, she routinely reviews this data and we greatly appreciate it. But any data requests, keep them coming, and I can, or Principal Hollis, we can decide who or what if they are creating a task force. I did see some equity committee meeting minutes, and they did mention potentially a task force. I don't know if they already have one or what it shows for our school or for our cluster, but we can ask more about that.
And I will say the principals from the cluster also meet as well, to talk about what's working at our schools as it relates to our data, to share strategies as well. So we don't keep it internal. I'm not sure what happened prior to all of us getting to the role, but I do think what was stated before with the continuity of administration, and having consistency in that role, because we've all been in the space for at least 2 years. We have almost like a principal cluster PLC, especially once they reorg how we're structured from an evaluative perspective. We felt that it was beneficial for us to continue to work together as a cluster K-12. And so that's what we have done.
And the CAT data jig, just if anybody hasn't watched it, is more of like an overview of our cluster. And both last year and this year, when I've helped lead that data dig, however, Nick from Data Dig did the presentation. We say that it's like a 30,000 view. And now you are to go to your school and dig deeper in the data and have conversations with your principals, ask them what they're doing with the intervention team. And that's exactly what, Principal Hollis did here today, bringing her staff or internal task force to come and speak to us about some of what's going on.
Yeah.
So we're encouraging, because every single school has differences.
This is very helpful. I just brought up because I want to make sure that I was clear on what is the answer to that request. The answer to that request is no, and understanding the administration's perspective on it too. But just knowing that the answer is no and being able to say these are the clear bullet points as to why. So sorry, I feel like I always slow us down. I'm not trying to keep slowing us down, but I feel like that 5-minute conversation gave me access to information that would allow me to clearly answer that question if asked out in the community.
Well, right now it would be very hard for us. It's from what I know, it's kind of impossible for us to establish a committee now, vote on it, have goals, because it can only outlive this, or it can only live for this Go Team. If you guys want to have this conversation and develop a task force, you can have a conversation with Principal Hollis and what that looks like, and someone could potentially motion and bring that to the table in the fall.
Yeah, no, I took away there's logistical reasons. I also took away there's substantive reasons. Even if we were to bring this back up in August, that there's some perspective as to where it would be most helpful and why, and where it would be less value add, more value add. So I feel like I learned a lot. I got what I need. I can give clear answers if asked.
And what we can do is, because there's a slight portion of the agenda in the CAT team where we can bring up needs from the community. Ms. Elder, you correct me if I'm wrong. It's a very slight part of the agenda. We could definitely lift that as an ask and something that can be discussed to start the year next year.
And just want to let everyone know the first cluster advisory team meetings have classically happened in October, November. So you're well into the school year. And we did give feedback again this year that those are really late to actually do work and respond to requests. So, and to Principal Hollis's point, we get the agenda from the district, and that agenda is our entire meeting. We often hear presentations and then have a breakout session with our cluster members, which is 20 to 30 minutes. And that is a task that we have to finish during that section. So it is very different than a Go Team meeting. They're all recorded and you can listen. It doesn't mean we can't do additional things outside. The CAT next year can decide to do another data dig, and whoever decides to do that can add on different components to look at the data across our individuals who come to our schools.
All right, we have 8 minutes left in our scheduled programming. And so I understand that there was a task force or committee request, I'll change it to say committee request from the parent organization that was read last meeting. My wonder is if that is something that should possibly be lifted for the August Go Team meeting as to whether or not a committee would be forged at that time, especially for time's sake.
But it's not a committee ask, and I can chime in here. We met briefly with the PTO president and the foundation president, incoming foundation president. And the ask is to include meeting regularly. And that wouldn't be a committee. You don't need a committee to do that. I'm sorry, Sudi, could you take over first? I apologize.
Yep, I sure can. So Deanna and I did meet with them to discuss what they had in mind, and their request was just to try to strengthen the coordination between the supporting bodies at the school, and to have sort of a regular, steering committee. It's the wrong word, but that's the word that occurs, meeting, and where it would bring together PTO and Booster Foundation, Go Team, designee of the principals, and not be limited to those groups. So if there were other groups that do main support of the school, that those could be included. And it's because each of those groups plays a big support role for the school, including on things like the field. And so the thought and the question for the Go Team side is, if we do that, and it would be possible to put that in as part of our strategic plan in this section that is our responsibility is shared, which deals with the school students having supportive families and community partners. So that was
if it's a steering committee, it still has to be a vote. Am I right or wrong, Diane Jacoby?
Well, it wouldn't be a committee. I mean, it's not a Go Team committee. It's a steering committee exists at, you don't have to call it a committee. It exists at other schools. It's not under the Go Team. So it would be, if we put, since the strategic plan is a living document, and the section that speaks to community partners, let me see if I can read it really quick. If someone wants to pull it up by chance, but I can read it. It says the school focus area number 2, Atlanta Public Schools students will have supportive families, communities, and partners. Build meaningful relationships, expand Atlanta partners for education, increase access and engagement for families and communities. So the one speaking to them, what it would be is that, would we consider and updating the strategic plan to include I forget what they call them, is it objectives that you put under a focus area, a line there that says that we would commit with bringing these groups together. So do you have like some better wording for me on that?
Yes, we could say, to coordinate meetings to bring together the school's supporting bodies in the spirit of collaboration. So.
Right, but that has to be a vote.
Mm-hmm.
Change the strategic plan
You
requires
have 4 minutes.
I motion to amend the strategic plan to include I believe it's called objective, underneath focus area number 2, with the wording that Sudi just gave, naming the PTO/booster, foundation and Go Team, and other community partners.
And I'll second.
So we would, okay, so we have a second. Is there any discussion on this motion?
In fact, I wonder how, I mean, it feels like a lot of this could just still be happening under the framework of our Go Team meetings. We can invite these members to speak, have where our meetings are, live stream, they're open to the public. We're already having these discussions. So why not bring them into the discussion as opposed to having meetings outside of the framework that we've already established with our Go Team?
That's a great question. So it's just like they have felt at other school family engagement leadership teams, which Sudi and I were invited to as Go Team members to one of the meetings. And other schools have steering committee meetings. It's so that conversations can happen at greater length and then report back. PTO and Foundation have been invited to our meetings to report out. They have not come, but that would also lengthen our meetings.
How would
they are also in your defense, Mr. Lambing, they are all 3 groups are also invited to the principal's coffees to speak during that time as well, if they desire. So,
and how would members of the Go Team, how would we decide who we're going to be a part of that group, and how would their activities be documented, officiated, and set up?
Right.
So just a lot of questions.
Right. So it's like we don't know what happens with the felt, right? There's many meetings that happen that we don't know. We don't know what's going on in the PTO meetings. We don't know what's going on in the foundation meetings. So this would be a way to collaborate with our community partners that are supporting our school to strengthen that and to have more report out. So the Go Team would decide who would go to those meetings. The chair would, if you guys have a designee that you want or how you guys want to do it. But this is really just in the spirit of collaboration with community partners, which is a huge item that APS continues to say that they want to build under our new administration. And they do a lot for our schools. So to your point, we want more transparency around these collaboration with our partners because it has not been happening in just an invite way. So this would solidify that.
Can you cite some specific examples? I'm just wondering why now. I
Sure.
understand
Sarah Smith has a steering committee. The Midtown High School last year, the PTO booster and Foundation have met. The President Katie Ludlam has mentioned to me that they've met several times and it's been super helpful. Just so you're not crossing paths, talking about things coming up, sharing, and then reporting out. So some schools use felt teams, etc.
I also just want to say the point of putting it into our strategic plan is because to that point, Jason, otherwise meetings can happen, but there is no official role for it. And this is something that would happen. The foundation was interested in exploring their own rules for it. The PTO is going to explore their rules for it, but this would sort of codify it so it lived in an official place and isn't just casual conversations.
Mr. Baker had his hand up.
Oh, now you're on mute.
Yeah, I feel like with less than a minute left in the meeting, this probably wasn't the best way for us to kind of get all the details out. And what I'm most concerned about is whoever's on the Go team next year, we're kind of creating something that it doesn't feel like there's a huge need, other than, obvious communication. And if we put it on the strategic plan, then it's, if it's mentioned there, that's one thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything would take place for the folks who are going to be on this Go team next year. Am I correct?
That was my thought process as well, Mr. Baker.
A living document can be modified at any time. So if they would want to remove it, they could remove it. But so I brought this to Principal Hollis at the beginning of the year and PTO and Go team heads. And they saw through the course of the year that it would be something meeting on a regular basis, kind of chatting and making a stronger connection and report out and transparency would be something that they would be interested in. So that is why it was brought. We can, if necessary, formally extend the meeting to talk about this. This was also a community request that was brought to us.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, by rule, it's already been seconded by Sudi, so it should have been voted on at least, or I guess this is the discussion part, but something has to be voted on. Am I correct?
Correct. I just was wondering if there's any more discussion. That's why I was allowing time for it.
I guess.
Yes, Mr. Baker, you have to vote to table.
And I would say, yeah, at this point, I'm more comfortable from my vantage point of, tabling it and setting up the particulars at the beginning of the next Go team here in August.
I guess the vote to table would be a no vote, or unless you want to motion differently.
Right.
So,
correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have hearts and mind been cleared with the discussion, because we need to go to vote?
All right. So we will then vote on the motion to add that to the strategic plan. All in favor? And you see, I think that's 3. And those opposed? Hina, are you
Mr.
able
Brooks,
to?
was that your hand raised? Yeah.
Okay. Hands raised. And so I counted, and I apologize. Hina, did you get a different count than me? I count 3 definitely opposed, and Hina and Dr. Bryan, I did not see you. Did you abstain, or are you abstain? You're abstaining. Okay.
Well, it looks like we might need to just add that to the August meeting, since it's 332, right? I don't know. Is that the rule? Is Jacoby still on?
She's here, but I don't know if she's
away.
Somebody can motion something else. They can modify the motion. They can make a different motion.
Or we can let it end. So right now would end unless someone motions to table.
I move we discuss and consider this in August.
I second that motion. So the motion is could you clarify your motion?
Oh, geez. That we hold a space to discuss various structure coordination, and the August Go Team meeting, or first Go Team meeting, whenever that happens to be for next year.
For a steering committee with PTO and foundation, is that
I don't want to be that specific. I just want to discuss coordination, I think, and then
coordination of, just specify what you want coordination of?
Across
Parent
the various
organization and
parent
partnership meeting.
organizations and partnerships. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll second that motion.
All right. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I believe that is unanimous.
Okay, I am over and I can leave this running, but I really don't have time to go over the principal's report, but it will be online. Enrollment has declined slightly. Our CCRPI attendance has declined slightly. We expect for that to go up. We are in the midst of hiring. I have elected to shift the hourly ELA teacher to be hired after leveling. I wanted to say that officially.
This is the reading intervention.
Right. We would still have all 3 reading intervention, but having 3 different people, that is going to be tabled because right now everybody's looking for full time. And so that will give us a chance because the state has changed the retirement rules and how many hours they can work and still get their pension. So that'll give us time to hear what the state is doing with the new law as they're sunsetting this old law that allowed them to receive their pension and work full time.
So can you just specify what exactly you're reducing, how much you're reducing? We voted on what we voted on and what you're reducing it to?
So I'm not reducing it. I'm tabling the hiring. So I'm still going to hire, but I'm choosing to hire after leveling.
How many positions could you?
It's just the one.
I thought it was 3 hourly, 1 for
The
each
other
grade.
2 are already there. 2 people that are there now, they will continue.
Okay, so leveling day is day 15. So after leveling day, then there should be an answer to the community regarding the hiring of that
No,
third
you have
person.
to wait for them to tell us how much they and all that kind of stuff. And then they give us the time frame for me to actually post the positions, and that's when I will post.
Is
So
that
the
around
money is
October,
still
you said
there.
this year? Okay.
You know, the year before it was September that I was able to get some in. It just depends on when they do the things that they do, Ms. Eldary. You know, I have nothing to do with those types of decisions.
And then how do you see this impacting reading intervention
It won't.
and
We'll
staffing?
still have the reading intervention the way we're doing it right now. It's just adding that extra person to have a little overlap in time for them to push into classes. We won't be able to do that in the first quarter. All right, I gave the assessment dates. Those are all on the school calendar. Boys soccer won the middle school championship. Congrats to them. We are getting the fields turfed over the summer. That is a partnership where Inter-Atlanta is paying for their usage of time. We've had some students to publish and to win some other things, publish a book. Those kinds of things. I am not belittling what's going on, but I just don't want my children standing out there by themselves. And we're having Earth Week this week, Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, during lunches. And then do you have anything for CAT? Open voting is going on now until the end of the week. And we will send out the candidate information.
For CAT, I sent you Miss Stacy Burton's email that you all received. I also sent you the request for information to add any items. We were able to fill out a form for each of the schools regarding facilities, eSPLOS, which I sent to all of you guys to ask for input. And I believe that is it, and sent you the links for the eSPLOS meetings. And those are available online for everybody else. If you do APS Cluster Advisory Team, you can see the meetings for that. We also did our data dig, our Midtown data dig, which I sent to you guys. Please share with the community. It has an extensive look at various different data points for the Midtown cluster. Anybody have any questions about CAT?
No. I don't have the ability to move the slide. Ms. Hollis, are you still there?
Team made me host. I can move the slide.
Okay.
I think I can. Maybe. Maybe not. Hold on a second.
I think she's sharing from
Yeah.
her desktop. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you'll be able to do that.
She would have had to make somebody the presenter. We are at the end with announcements, which I do not. Do we have any additional announcements?
What was in the presentation is just a reminder to complete your year-end survey as a Go team member and principal feedback, and complete your required trainings as soon as possible if you haven't done so.
Perfect.
And tomorrow night is the last cluster advisory team meeting. So if anybody wants to log on for that, that's the last one for that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you, Ms. Moore.
No problem.
I believe we do not have any additional public comment. And so if there is nothing further, we will motion to adjourn at 6:28.
So moved.
I'll second. This is Dion.
Great. Thank you, Dion. All in favor? Good. Thank you all for a good Go team year. Right? And have a good evening.
Thank you all so much.